If I were to ask you who was the most terrifying Spider-Man villain, who would you say? Out of the giant, colorful cast of villains that we've seen over the years, while some have came and gone, while some have stayed relevant, I don't think anyone has really seen anything too threatening. But today, I want to take a look at one of the most nightmarish characters that we've seen, Carl King. In the Spider-Man universe, he's also known as the Thousand. He only makes one appearance in the Spider-Man comic books, but he has left a mark that will surely be remembered, and I'm going to make sure that everyone who watches this understands why I believe he is the most terrifying Spider-Man villain. As we all know, Peter Parker has been bullied over the years by various characters. However, they've never really done anything that was too heart-wrenching or terrible. There were awful people who have bullied him, but they've never done anything that was too disgusting. That is until we meet Carl King, who has bullied and tormented Peter Parker ever since they were children, to the point where it's actually become an addiction to him. We don't really know what causes Carl King to have this kind of attitude towards Peter Parker, but all we know is that he is definitely one of the most terrifying bullies to have. We start off seeing Carl King simply staring out of a window in a diner. Little do we know that he is actually watching Spider-Man taking on the Rhino. As their fight progresses, Spider-Man eventually gets the upper hand and defeats the Rhino. However, the story doesn't pick up on Rhino and Spider-Man's fight. It mostly depicts Carl King's thoughts and what he sees this as. He sees Spider-Man as taking the glory that he rightfully deserves. It becomes pretty evident that Carl King is simply envious of Spider-Man. However, this envy is also a rivaled hatred. Carl King knows Peter Parker is Spider-Man, and he claims that this is all powers that he rightfully deserves. He plans to take it from Spider-Man one way or the other. Carl King stalks Peter Parker to the point where he even knows where he works and his closest colleagues. He gets to the point where he even invades the Daily Bugle when everyone else is out for hours and corners one of Peter Parker's colleagues. He grabs her, throws her into a closet, and reveals himself to her. She tries to kick him in the genitals, but it has no effect. She then attempts to mace him, but it does nothing. She then sits there wondering, why are her defenses doing nothing? This would hurt a human. But Carl King was no longer human. We later see Peter Parker attending a party with his girlfriend's friends. His girlfriend, Sky, is a model and she is attending a model party. However, Peter Parker isn't fitting in, and she takes notice of this. She claims that if he didn't want to come, they could have gone somewhere else. But he wanted to do this for her and decided to go. But then he slips up and says that her friends are just being stuck up. We don't see what happens next, but we can assume that the night didn't end well, seeing as how Peter Parker is walking home in the rain. Peter's night is far from over. As we can see, Miss Patton calls out to him. Miss Patton claims that Peter Parker is the only one that can help her. Peter, of course, comforts her as the hero that he is, but little does he know he's in for a surprise. Peter allows Miss Patton into his apartment, where he allows her to put on a change of clothes. But that's when Miss Patton reveals that she knows that he is Spider-Man. Miss Patton then begins to attack Peter, kicking him and throwing him into a table, where she pounces on him as if she were an animal. It's obvious that this is Carl King. However, Peter has yet to find out who or what this was. He attempts to fight back, but his attacks are in vain, as it seems that his punches do nothing to hurt this beast. They take their fight outside, and it seems that whoever or whatever this was is even a challenge for Spider-Man. As this creature bites into Spider-Man, Peter is knocked unconscious. Spider-Man does eventually wake up, only to find the beast is luring over him. They begin to chat, and the beast asking Peter, "Do you remember me?" The monster then reveals itself to be Carl King, and what it did was, it took over Miss Patton, and what the 1,000 truly is 1,000 spiders that Carl King is now made up of. Carl then explains that the way he takes over his hosts is by consuming them from the inside out with as many spiders until they're nothing but a hollow shell. Carl then explains that he should have been the real Spider-Man, not Peter, and that he was now going to consume Peter from the inside out and take what he felt was rightfully his. Before Carl can start, however, Mr. Ambrose, Peter's neighbor, walks into the room after hearing the commotion. He then sees a tied-up Spider-Man about to be consumed from the inside out by a giant spider. He raises alarm, and Carl realizes that he can't let this man escape, otherwise he would be found out. Carl then plunges himself into Mr. Ambrose and then begins to consume his organs, vitals, and everything else, only leaving nothing but his skin so he can use it as a suit. Peter, watching everything, asks Carl, "Is this how you do things? Don't you care about life?" Carl simply replies, "I'm drinking this idiot's liquefied brain. What do you think?" Carl then explains that he was there when Peter was bitten by the spider that gave him his powers. After stalking him, Carl decided that he would want the same powers. However, due to the spider now being dead, it was impossible for him to get the same powers as Spider-Man. So he decided to do the next best thing, or at least the next best thing in his opinion. He decided to eat the spider. After a few days with no results, one day Carl woke up. His mother came into the room, and without even thinking about it, he consumed her from the inside out. Feeling no remorse whatsoever, he then does the same thing to his father. He then goes on a spree of killing people, saying that every time he ate somebody, he grew a little bit stronger, and that if he wanted to take out Peter, he would have to be at his absolute best. He then kills his girlfriend, children, hobos, and many others. About a dozen a year, he claims. Peter, absolutely disgusted by Carl, begins to attack him once again. Carl and Peter fight for a while until Carl gets the upper hand and throws Peter outside the window. They begin their fight on top of the roof. Peter then tells Carl off, telling him that he is no longer afraid of him like when they were children. Carl, absolutely ballistic by this outburst, charges at Peter like a raging bull. During the fight, Carl, due to his rage, doesn't even realize that he's about to hit a transfusion box, which begins to electrocute him profoundly. Peter then looks down as Carl is falling and meeting his demise, and claims, "God forgive you, you sad, sad fool." Peter then goes to Aunt May's apartment, where they decide to have their own little party, and they decide to sing and dance the night away. But then, we get one more surprise. It turns out, one of Carl's spiders has survived, and now he was once again planning his revenge. Luckily, however, without realizing it, a passerby looking for a place to smoke accidentally steps on the last spider, ultimately bringing in to Carl King. I did find something humorous while coming to the end of this book. I found it very humorous that Carl King was so desperate to be loved that he was willing to kill people and steal someone else's identity. But at the end of his life, no one even knew he existed. The only ones that did know he existed were the ones that he killed, and Peter. Peter has completely moved on, not giving him a second thought after leaving the top of the building. And in his last few moments of being alive, he's not even killed by Spider-Man. He's killed by some random person. We don't even know his name. And he was just simply looking for a place to smoke. So at the end of Carl King's life, no one even noticed him. It's quite ironic how this was this desperate attempt to become popular, but at the end of it, no one even knows his existence. And I guess it's befitting that no one really knows that he exists right now in the real world too, seeing as if that is something that he also would have wanted. Hope you guys enjoyed that video. I'm Double V, and I'll see you in the next one.